California mayor takes a stand against migrant transfers. World Cup fever makes for record TV ratings, and how you can make beer slushies right at home. All these stories and more coming up on The Rundown.
All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready, camera one. Ready, camera two.
Record.
3, 2, 1.
Record.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is The Rundown, where Steven Cruiser entertains Michelle Fields with riddles. We also take a look at some of the top stories making headlines. I'm your host, John Phillips. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is PJTV contributor Michelle Fields, and here in Los Angeles is stand-up comic Steven Cruiser. This episode is geared towards some of the bigger headlines making news this summer. So let's go to the top of the rundown, and we begin with Michelle.
At the top of my rundown, a Southern California mayor urged residents to fight migrant transfers from Texas. 140 people were supposed to be taken from Texas and flown to Murrieta, California. That's about an hour outside of San Diego. They were to be processed at a Border Patrol facility before being turned over to Immigrations and Customs Enforcement on Tuesday. But residents protested their arrival and the transfer never happened. The plan was to help alleviate thousands of illegal immigrants from crowding border cities. Many came to the U.S. to flee violence in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Take a listen to what the mayor of Murrieta told residents about the plan.
What we've been told that most of these immigrants are families. These are mothers and young children or fathers and young children. What will happen is once they're processed by the Border Patrol, they will be released to ICE agents who will make sure they get to their destination and or transportation hubs.
By the way, another flight carrying 140 illegal immigrants from Texas is expected to arrive today in California. So, John, what do you think we should be doing with all these people? I mean, since October, there have been over 40,000 kids who have come over the border, and they're just sitting around, and this administration doesn't know what to do with them. What do you think?
Well, I'd borrow a line from the old Elvis Presley song, Return to Sender. And I'd send them right back to El Salvador, because they're not coming here to flee the drug cartels or to flee the violence or because they think that they're going to be persecuted by the government. They are fleeing those countries, make no mistake about this, because the president indicated that he wasn't going to deport them. He said that. It was reported accurately in the press down there. Everyone says, oh, there was this rumor that was started by the church, this rumor that was started by the radio stations down there, that if you got there before the end of July, that you'd get your free citizenship. It wasn't a rumor. It was the truth, because President Obama said it. And Steven Cruiser, even Hillary Clinton says that we should send these people back.
Well, the administration's starting to move in that direction now, too. I think this is another case. I wrote about this at the Tatler yesterday, where the Obama administration, I do think that they encouraged them to come here, but it's another thing that they did not think through. And now that they're here, it's just getting worse. I mean, they were out protesting buses and blocking them from going anywhere in San Diego yesterday. That's how the protests are devolving already. And now John Kerry is talking tough. The administration is starting to talk tough. They keep threatening to deport. Now they're on this, we're going to deport them, we're going to deport them. But they're not doing anything yet. They just keep saying, it's like this administration is all about, they think magic words are going to do everything.
Well, but how you deport them actually means something here. Because if you say, all right, we're going to give you a court date where you have to show up and then we'll deport you, none of them are going to show up. They're going to go with their families, and that's going to be the last you ever see of them.
So how do you do it?
Well, you just have to take them from the camps to the airport. I mean, that's what I would do. I mean, I would just take care of it right then and there. Because if you give them a slip and say show up at this time at this date to be deported, then none of them are going to show up.
Novel idea. You have to let ICE do their jobs for once.
I mean, how would you do it, Michelle?
I think I would put them on a bus and send them back to Mexico and have them figure out what they need to do. And I think once that happens, we see the first round of people doing that, then those rumors are going to go back to Central America where they're saying, hey, they're sending all the people back. People are going to stop sending their children. They're doing it because they know that this administration won't do anything. But once they get word that the administration is just sending them back to Mexico and telling them to figure out what to do, then they'll stop.
All right, Cruiser, what do you have for us?
At the top of my rundown, add Jeffrey Toobin and Jonathan Turley to the list of liberals who freely admit that President Obama is overstepping his legal authority. George Washington University professor Jonathan Turley declares it's an awful 10 days for the Obama administration's legal philosophy. He said that's because Obama was rebuked on the Fourth Amendment in the cell phone case, the First Amendment in the Hobby Lobby case, and on the separation of powers. Take a listen.
This is sweeping. I mean, people should not get lost in the reference to closely held corporations. The other large corporations were the least likely to ask for exemptions. Closely held corporations are huge in this country, and most of the businesses people relate with in their daily lives are actually small, often family-owned businesses, and this has a direct impact on those businesses. And what's going to happen is we're in a situation much like we were years ago with the Heller decision, when the court recognized the individual right to bear arms. We're still working out the details of how far that goes to the edges. That's what's going to happen here. It is a significant game changer of sort of, you have this theme of corporations being people too. It's a huge blow to the Obama administration. This has been an awful 10 days. They were previously found to be in violation of the Fourth Amendment and privacy. Then they were found to be in violation of the separation of powers, and now they've been found to be in violation of the First Amendment and the religion clauses. I mean, you just don't want to get out of bed after a week like that.
CNN's Jeffrey Toobin then offered up some perspective on the contents of the Constitution. Listen to this.
One of the lines that sort of jumped out at me, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but a close paraphrase, I take these executive actions when we have a problem and Congress refuses to act. Well, that's not necessarily the way the Constitution set it up. He can only act when Article 2 of the Constitution says the president has the authority. He can't allocate money. He can't. He can allocate money that's already been appropriated by Congress, but he can't appropriate money himself. So, but he is treading potentially on treacherous legal grounds here. And he did say, for example, I'm telling the Department of Homeland Security to move resources from the center of the country to the border. Clearly, that's within his power.
Sure, that's in the executive authority.
There's no doubt about that. But once you start new initiatives, it gets a little more dicey.
You can add Lawrence Tribe to this, too. He's been jumping on the administration in recent weeks, and then yesterday he actually told an MSNBC host to stop using caricatures of conservatives, because that doesn't do the dialogue any good. Now, I'm old enough, you might be old enough, to remember a day when all the Democrats weren't acting like emo progressives, okay? You could have a conversation with your liberal friends all the time. Are we seeing some of the old guard finally peeling away from this hyperventilating narrative that seems to be driving everything in this administration, or is it just just a weird week where these three guys are saying?
Well, the smart ones certainly are, and this is something I think that right wingers should I think really take note of. We need to stop comparing President Obama to Jimmy Carter, because he's not like Jimmy Carter. President Obama is a poor man's Dick Nixon. Yes. Dick Nixon ruled by executive order. He had a Congress that was hostile to him. It was controlled by Democrats that I would argue are far more liberal than the ones that we see today. I mean, you look at some of those guys, those old guard guys, the New Dealers that were in the Senate and the House. I mean, it was a different world that he had to deal with. So, for example, he wanted them to cut spending. They wouldn't do it. So he said, all right, I'm the executive. I get to spend the money. I'm not going to spend it. It was called impoundment. And the courts came in and smacked him down. And they said, you know what? The Congress of the United States decides what money is spent. And if they say spend the money, by law you have to spend the money. And you can't make the executive decision to not spend it. You're in violation of the law. You're in violation of the separation of powers. Okay? Look at what President Obama is doing compared to what Dick Nixon was doing with impoundment. What he's doing is above and beyond worse than anything that Nixon ever tried to do. And the left went nuts when Dick Nixon tried the impoundment. What are they doing now with President Obama, where he's trying to create open borders? He's trying to, if you look at what he's doing with environmental regulations, what he's doing in that regard. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't respect the Constitution. He thinks he's a king.
You and I weren't working together back in '09, but I was going with the Nixon comparison from the from the early days of this administration. I said, this guy doesn't remind me. This guy reminds me of Nixon, not Jimmy Carter. Michelle, now we saw Dick Durbin yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Pretty much just cede legislative authority to the president. Well, of course, he can't do that, but he said it's okay. He can borrow some legislative power from us. This is one of the most ridiculous aspects of all that's going on right now, where the legislators seem willing to give up the power that they have to the president. Do you think that's throughout the ranks of the Democratic Party right now, or are only a couple wackos like Dick Durbin thinking, oh, it's okay if he goes ahead and does this?
Well, look, I think, honestly, I agree with John with what you said, but I think that President Obama is really the president that Richard Nixon had hoped he would become. He wished that he was, because this president has been able to get away with so much. Yes, he's had a tough week with the Supreme Court, but if you look at everything else, you look at the EPA, Obamacare, I mean, these are the IRS scandal. I mean, these are things that Nixon wished he was able to do without a media on top of him, because let's be honest, the media has not been on top of Obama the way that they were with Nixon. I think that the top Democrats are on board with Obama, which is basically, they're on his side. But I think there are a lot of younger, more junior senators and Democrats who are upset about what's happening. You know, the president says Congress doesn't do anything. Well, there's a new piece out in Politico that says that a lot of the junior senators who are Democrats are upset with Harry Reid because he won't allow them to vote on anything. Senators like Booker have not taken one vote since they've been in office. And it's because Reid doesn't want to get anything done, because they don't want anything controversial in time before the elections. So really, it's the Democrats that aren't doing anything. And then this president comes out there and says, oh, I can't do anything. I got to do it on my own. It's a bunch of garbage.
You know what I'd do if I were the Republicans? This is a political power play.
Yeah.
I'd take all these illegal aliens that we're not deporting, and I'd send them to states where you have Democrats on the ballot for the U.S. I'd send them to Alaska, send them to Arkansas,
That's brilliant.
Send them to Louisiana, send them to New Hampshire.
That's absolutely brilliant. John Phillips, 2016.
At the top of my rundown, we have President Obama's very bad summer. If you can't tell, there's a theme today. The president has been plagued by a number of problems that just aren't going away. The first was Obamacare, and then many problems associated with the Affordable Care Act after the application deadline closed. He also caught a lot of heat for the VA scandal, in which dozens of veterans died waiting for appointments and procedures at VA hospitals. The president also felt the fallout over the release of the Bo Bergdahl situation. Also, he's dealing with an ongoing immigration reform issue. And the voters can't ever punish him again because he's termed out. He's in a second term as president. What the voters can do is they can make him a lame duck, where in my opinion, he already is. And they can punish his allies in the Congress in the midterm elections, particularly in red states.
If you look at the metrics right now, it's going that way. There was a Quinnipiac poll released this morning that says he is now the least popular president in the modern era. He's eclipsed George Bush on his way down in that way, George W. Bush, which I don't understand, because Jimmy Carter should be number 2 on that list, if we're going to be honest. But yeah, so what happens in situations like this, usually in a midterm, if the presidential approval ratings are that low, the party gets shellacked in November. And as things are going right now, if the Republicans can just not get distracted by anything, I think it's going to be bad for them. And you're right, he is a lame duck already, hence the executive action threats all over the place.
All right, Michelle, I want you to run with a hypothetical with me here. You're in the cafeteria of the United States Congress, the U.S. Senate, and you got a couple of red state Democrats that are sitting there hanging out, having lunch, talking to each other. Let's say Mark Begich and Mary Landrieu. What are they saying to each other about President Obama right now, about the position that they've put them in?
Oh, they're in a very, very tough position. I mean, I think that's why the Democrats don't want to do anything in Congress. They don't want any more media. They don't want any more press. They have enough problems right now as it is. This president has made it very difficult with, of course, the swap for the prisoner. There's the VA scandal, the IRS scandal. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I think this president has essentially just checked out. I think the president is tired. He's over it. I think he just wants to be done with this presidency. presidency, I don't think he's planning on doing anything. I think he's over it, to be honest.
You know, Bill Clinton was a guy that enjoyed being president. You could tell he enjoyed the perks. He enjoyed having the chef there. He liked the helicopter at his disposal. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like being president, does he?
Well,
And
you look at the amount of whining.
Neither does the first lady.
You're right, and they started whining about how much work it was and how awful it was. I mean, 3 months into this presidency in the first term, there's something. I think they want to be TV stars. I don't think they want to be politicians. I think they both want to be TV stars.
Well, the rumor is they're going to move to Palm Springs.
Well, no. There was another rumor they were going to go to one of the Carolinas. Fingers crossed for that.
Yeah.
As long as they're not in Washington, I don't care.
All right, now it's time to look at some of the softer and lighter stories making news this summer. And Cruiser, you're up first.
My sweet spot, 2 popular progressive sites, theveteransalon.com and newcomervox.com, have inspired perhaps the greatest parody accounts ever on Twitter. In another era, the headlines tweeted by each account would be obvious fakes, but Salon and Vox are both so nonsensical that people keep falling for them, even though the Salon parody account doesn't even tweet links. The Vox parody account does tweet links, but they all go to blank pages. These two highlight 2 of my favorite things right now. First is that Salon and Vox are so absolutely ridiculous that you really can't tell that they're being parodied. Like yesterday, I forget which one of the 2, right before the World Cup game, said, wondering who to root for today? The United States team has more minorities on it, so go USA. And but that's not far from something you would hear on Salon. So I've been tweeting these every day. The other thing is, as a blogger, one of my pet peeves is that you'll tweet a link to a post, and people will just react to the headline in the tweet without bothering to click the post, and I'm weeding out all of those people right now. I tweet a bunch of these all day long, and then the people who just overreact come out screaming at me, and then I nuke them.
How ticked is Joan Walsh?
Oh, she's apoplectic right now. She's waiting to find out who's behind it and why it's racist. That's what she's doing right now.
All right, Michelle, you're up next.
So World Cup fever continues around the world, and Univision received its highest viewership ever when Mexico took on the Netherlands. 10.4 million viewers tuned into that game on Sunday night. That's the most watched soccer game ever on Univision or any U.S.-based Spanish network. Well, now that, unfortunately, the United States lost this week, I have a feeling that people are going to start tuning out. But it was incredible to see how many people got excited about it and actually watched the game, because America usually doesn't really care about the World Cup. But this year, it seems like they did.
You know what helped Univision's numbers a lot? People like me who don't have cable, because I've been watching it online on Univision. That's where I've been watching the tournament, because they're streaming there. So they got all of us who have given up cable in America. We're brushing up on our Spanish this week.
I'm with Ann Coulter on this. I can't get into a sport where the over/under is 2.
I understand that people like it. I used to be like that, and then I started to think it's a game. If it's something I can go to a bar and watch over a beer, and much better this than an Obama press conference.
Well, I mean, there's any number of things in the world that promote alcoholism besides a 0-0 tie.
I don't know. There's something. I think all the vehement protesting against soccer is turning me into a contrarian soccer fan now. If I can watch a game over a beer and irritate that many people, I'm in.
All right. Well, sticking with the subject of alcoholism is my sweet spot. Beer Slushies. Japanese beer company Kirin has released a home version of a machine that pumps frozen beer foam into your beer. The frozen beer topping acts like a cap to maintain the beer's temperature for 30 minutes after it was poured. The machine debuted back in 2012 in Japan and at Dodger Stadium. But now for $65, yes, you too can have one of your very own. Just one word of warning, the directions are in Japanese. So that means, Stephen Cruiser, be very careful. Or learn Japanese.
I love what they do with entertainment. Television, now this. Bless the Japanese.
Konnichiwa. That's going to do it for today's show. Would you like to try a beer slushie? Stephen Cruiser would. You can go over to his house and have one. How about President Obama's very bad summer? We want to know what you think, so make sure to put your comments in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips for Stephen Cruiser joining me in Los Angeles. And, no, that's not Stephen Cruiser, but that's Michelle Fields in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Cruiser, Fields. Cruiser, Fields. There we go. That's Fields. It's like playing the match game. There we go. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown. Have yourself a good day.